Well, welcome to our Westwood Lecture. Today we are celebrating a double special treat. Well, first of all, before I introduce today's speaker and our dear colleague, Professor Young Clover, I want to welcome the students who are the nominees and finalists in a number of national, international scholarships organized by the great program run by Roseanne. And I am following the script here because I want to make sure I read all the scholarships correctly and not miss any one of them. So we have the prestigious scholarship nominees of the following scholarships here with us today: the Fulbright U.S. Student Program, the Marshall Scholarship, the Churchill Scholarship, the Gate Cambridge Scholarship, and the Rhodes Scholarship. So a huge round of applause to this annual tradition of welcome. And now, the main feature of the event and a very special treat. Now, before I introduce Professor Cooper, I want to show you a book that's been on my bookshelf, close within reach for 20 some odd years already. Well, you recognize this is the first edition.
Yes.
I know you have a second edition, 2012. I haven't bought that one yet. It's called The Philosophy of Science, The Central Issues. This first edition, Norton, 1998. When I was a student at a West Coast University in California, I was a student in engineering, but I took a number of philosophy courses, including one on philosophy of science, and this was the textbook, the anthology. And it's only about 1,400 pages, and I haven't finished reading it. Now, being an anthology, of course, is all about the taxonomy and the organization, but also this one's special because every section has an introduction by the co-editors, so Martin Kerr and J.A. Clover, and then at the end of each section, after the 4 to 6 regional papers, there is actually a bit of a debate and explanation. And I would read the whole introduction to you, but I don't want to take time away from Puzzles of Portraits. So I'll just say this was my food and drink and alcoholic beverage and ice cream all combined into one, and caffeine into one for many days and nights ever since. Not only when I was a student, but ever since. In fact, when I get frustrated with budget questions, I seek consolation. And reminders of joyous journey as a student and a scholar, if I may, from this anthology. I actually reserved one question at the end. It may not be related to your talk today, might be related to a topic you brought up back in this anthology for Professor Cooper. So, as an engineering student, of course, I've heard of Purdue and read the textbooks from Purdue faculty when I was a student, but my first introduction to the name Purdue University in philosophy, albeit it's a very limited sampling from my own point of view. I know there are many angles to get in touch with Purdue Philosophy Department and liberal arts, but for me, personally, it was through this book, because clearly about the editors, Professor Purdue Philosophy Department. So it is such an honor for me. I say this every time, but I say this now with a personal touch, holding the book that's been next to my mind, in my mind, throughout all these 25 years. Welcome to Westwood, Professor Cole.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you, Charles. How we doing? Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Chiang here and Cover have another thing in common. It's pretty indirect, but you might think not. We both have a mentor named Cover, right? So mine was my old man, and the best there is. And yours was a dissertation director, maybe?
That's right, my
or
PhD advisor and undergrad co-advisor.
Okay, well, there we
Tom
go.
Cover.
Yes, right. Do you gamble?
No, we don't have to talk about it. It's being recorded. What Tom Cover did, he did.
Yes, yes.
Statistics professor.
Right. Okay, well, let's not dwell. Look, so here's another fact about Chiang here is he let my regard for his distinguished office. Sorry, hang on a sec. I've thanked you, have I? Thank you, yeah?
No,
Just
no,
now?
quite the other
And
way.
like Catherine, Teresa, Anthony, the big guy, right? Thank you, Charles, and you youngsters, you kids, I almost said. I get to say that. Congratulations to you for distinguished scholarship applicants. This is a great thing to do. We are all proud of you, and we wish you well. You'll probably be, some of you will be hearing, maybe it's nervous time right about now here in late October and into November. So good luck, but you do us proud to be in the program, and we congratulate all those who, Roseanne, for running these things, and you doubtless have lots of help as well. Let's see. Okay, apologies in advance. Okay. Most people have a comma after that. I'm sorry, so no apologies, but I am sorry that my focus has been and will be largely drawn from the early modern period, so that will include, the Renaissance figures, Florentine, and mostly north of the Alps, the Flemish artists and art historians. But so this entails another, lovely for me, maybe unfortunate for you, sort of restriction that will not only be looking at art that's older, but in black and white. Now, I don't know if black and white are colors. Ask the people who know. I don't know. But I think black and white's beautiful, and I love these images, so we'll look at a few images. I like pictures, so I'll show you some pictures. But I'm sorry for that restriction. If you like color, I'm sorry about that. I'm not a photographer, so there we go. As you'll see, some of these aren't the best recordings of the art pieces that we look at, but there you go. We live with what we've got. My talk with you today will be not representative of what goes on in a philosophy department by philosophers. So we have here a distinguished dean of liberal arts, and we are grateful to David for his support of our department and all our departments. One of the things that is wonderful about this program, the Westwood Lectures, is it's an occasion. Our campus is a huge one, and we don't appreciate the utter astonishing variety and breadth of work that gets done here. And just, I don't know, I'm usually unable to come to these because I'm not much good at this time of day, but I try to watch them, and it's just astonishing what our colleagues do here on this campus. And so one of the things that David has been good at, our dean, is supporting us in philosophy and our department head, and that trickles up I don't know, can things trickle up? Let's pretend so. Right, to Mung and his offices. So thank you to those two. But the variety is something that is relevant to my point about the chat today with you being maybe illustrative of what some of us do in philosophy, but it's certainly not representative. So please don't draw any conclusions, and in particular, don't hold it against my colleagues in philosophy on the basis of what goes on here today. All right, let's get down to it. Well. So what's just and also to get it out of the way so nobody complains. I don't expect people to even be able to read this, but the bibliographical stuff is important to us who fuss with these sorts of things and think hard about them. So, all right. So, Alberti de Pittura, Leonardo. Is it true, Professor Jacovides, that one shouldn't say Da Vinci? Like I've been calling Chiang here, Chiang. I refer to myself as Cover. Anyway, the Tratto of Vasari, most all of you have encountered Vasari. Van Mander, you can think of the Schilderboek as a sort of a Flemish version of Vasari. Junius, nobody knows about him, and shame on them. And then, honorable mention, Pliny the Elder. Okay, so that's out of the way. All right, so if you expect to hear a little something in the philosophy of art today, mostly no. Let me say, I don't know, but I suspect there is no such thing as art. Now, that doesn't have any consequences at all for those of you who are art lovers, as you would describe it. But if I'm right, you don't know what it is you love. And that should be a tiny bit embarrassing. It's not my job to show you this, but in an explanatory way, you'd be forgiven if you thought, well, here's a philosopher, and he's going to talk about portraits, and so you do a little inference with a false premise that I'll let you figure out for yourselves and draw the conclusion that, well, here's some philosophy of art today. There is such a thing as philosophy of art, but if you look at the philosophy of art textbooks, my colleague, Professor Smith, as Charles, okay? Loaned me some, as has Professor Jacovides. These textbooks are an utter disaster, an embarrassing disaster. And this is not the philosopher's fault. It's the fault of their subject, which is a disaster, an embarrassment, an ununified, heterogeneous mess. Now, one can say this only if, by my lights, only if there are lots of putative cases, examples, instances, the philosopher might say, of, and then we sort of, I don't know, we run out of much definitive to say. To say something definitive is to say something like what you would get with a definition. Right? But when I say there's art, I'm not talking about a word with 3 letters, okay? I'm not giving you a semantic account of linguistic use, right? I want to know what there is in the world. Is there art? Is there what, you might say? Right, and that's just it. This person will offer a theory, another theorist will offer a theory. One of the things that the scientists are perhaps best at, but economists and all our social scientist friends and on down offer theories that we take it, have, well, what you might call their subject matter, philosophy of art. There is no such thing of art if there's nothing that it is to be art. So the question, what is it to be art, makes reference to what I would call the correct answer to the question, what is it? What is art? Now, this is almost always a good question. What is, or what are, what is justice? It's an old kind of question. What is justice? What is a dog or a diamond? And what philosophers from antiquity on down to the present day, maybe I should add until recently, have always thought that the only correct form an answer to that question can take is in the form of exactly those conditions that have to be satisfied by all and only, I'll say F's, we always pick that, cases of justice or instances of a dog or whatever. There's something that it is to be a dog. You don't get to just decide what a dog is. You don't get to excuse me, I almost made a mistake. Right, my colleagues are worried about me cussing, so all right. If I cut, it's not cussing, it's just, we need these words. But all right, so, all right. So, take any theory of art that you might get from your philosophy of art book. Here's how the contemporary scene goes. And it has gone this way roughly since when Fry had his 1913, probably the post-empiricist, the London show. Basically, I don't know, I'm going to get in trouble, but all right. So basically, it's the middle finger to whatever's counting nowadays. That's the gig. No. So for any theory of art, there's someone who says, this is art, and it doesn't meet the conditions on offer by this theory. That's just, and you might know what I mean. Now, I had the thought, not just to rub it into my colleague here, my friend, but sort of, to just not show up today. Right? That would have suited me, wouldn't have suited him, and it would have been disrespectful, right? And so until I'd say, no, that's the idea. Right? That's the idea. The performance is nobody's here. And then everybody goes, ooh, like, my God, no, and right, all right, so, I don't know, John Cage and who was it, the Willem but Koenig are sitting at a table, and Koenig looks down there at some crumbs on the table and says, like, that ain't art. And, Cage, who is famous for the composition, what's 433? So this is a composition that has no damn score. And if you want to hear it, too bad, because it doesn't sound like anything. And so on. I'm thinking this is bullshit. That's what I'm thinking. Now, what would it be for me to be wrong about that? It would be for that and its kind to actually comprise a kind for which there are conditions that can either be met or fail to be met. Otherwise, it literally just is raising your hand and say, I got something that ain't that, where that is no better off. So for any theory of art there is, the artists will always win because they say, here's some art, and it ain't that. And that's the game. You hold up the middle finger, and then people go ooh and ah, and so whether it's a score, a so-called composition that has no score at all, or a pile of dog shit in a room with that you paid to go see with ribbons around it, and so on. You know what I mean. Don't pretend like you don't know what I mean. Like, you know what I mean. So, but here's the cool thing. There doesn't need to be art in order for there to be philosophy of art, right? Say, or to give a talk on art. So, yeah, you can give a talk on art, but you can't give a true talk on art if there ain't any. Like, that's not right. Right? I teach my students in metaphysics. Here's an example of a good metaphysical claim. Nothing exists. Now, that doesn't have a good chance of being true, right? But it counts as a philosophical claim if you give reasons in support of whether or not there is an F for whatever F you pick. Justice, dogs, and sort of more interesting things in between. The case with art doesn't work because the artist will always win when they give a counterexample. So a counterexample is a case of an F that doesn't meet the conditions on offer by the theory for being an F. And it doesn't matter what you offer, there will be a counterexample, right? So I smell that and I turn my back on it. That's just what I'm saying. But one can still count as doing the philosophy of that. By the way, I'm not poo-pooing, leave the dog poop aside, but I'm poo-pooing art, so-called, which isn't anything. So I'm literally serious when I say there is no such thing as art because there's nothing that it is to be art. And what I mean by that is there's no correct answer to the question, what is art? Where the only correct answer has to take that form of conditions satisfied by all and only things, and there not be any counterexamples. Well, there are always counterexamples. All right. Now, sadly, or, well, whateverly, this is an old-fashioned way of doing things. And a lot of philosophers don't like this anymore. So, like, particularly I'm an old stodgy old buzzard who does things the old way. And mostly nowadays, increasingly, that's the faddish way is to say, no, like Cover, doing it the old way. But, you know, we're more, I don't know, open-minded. I'm sort of worried about being so open-minded that your brains fall out. But it's a matter of fact that there's a good number of my colleagues who think that Cover's route on this stuff is pure folly. That's why I want you to understand that what I say isn't representative of what philosophers do. It's illustrative of what an increasingly fewer and fewer philosophers do, is take seriously this idea that I was sketching about there being these kinds of conditions for all and only Fs, right? Otherwise, there ain't none, okay? So my colleagues, increasingly more of them, you know, well, what's the right response to human folly? It's either to laugh or maybe to weep. Right? So I'm going to show you some pictures of my colleagues. There's a laughing one, here's a weeping one, right? And while I show you some pictures of laughing and weeping philosophers, let me just suggest that there ought to be something one can do when, well, one is confronted with what I called an ununified, heterogeneous, what did I say? Embarrassing mess. What does one do? Well, you can walk away, of course, but suppose you find, I don't know, things like that fascinating and interesting, as I do. All right. We'll look at it again here in a sec. But now, that isn't really a portrait of a picture of one of my colleagues, but there's the laughing. Sorry, that was the weeping. That was the laughing. Here's more laughing, here's more weeping, laughing and weeping, right? The youngster, these youngsters in my department that don't do things this way, like way smarter than I'll ever be. No, I'm dead serious. I'm not smiling. I'm not trying to be funny. This isn't hyperbole, right? Like way smarter than I'll ever be. And whether or not they've thought about the ethics of laughing at your colleague, or weeping for your colleague, right? The point is that, well, if these aren't literally my colleagues, then, images of my colleagues, we can at least wonder two things: what the right human response to folly, human folly is, which I think is an ethical question. And it may surprise you to know that the people who made images like these laughing and laughing, thought hard and long about what the right response to human folly is. As I would have put it when I was a kid, the way we grew up, it's like, what's the Christian response to human folly? That's the way you say it, right? And by their lights, there's a fact of the matter here, right? But what's one to do if one encounters, well, not this, but this plus everything else you can think of, including empty rooms and pure silence and everybody go, ooh, ah. Then what do you do? Well, you can either walk away from it, as I say, I refuse to do that, or you can be an optimist and say, yeah, well, maybe one day we can give a theory for which there are no counterexamples. And nobody will say, hey, here's something that ain't that, and it counts. Maybe. My suggestion is something, I don't know what I called it. Start sorting in hopes of locating amidst the embarrassing heterogeneous mess, things that are actually of a kind, right, that are better behaved and might admit to theorizing. Okay. Grieving and laughter. Weeping and laughing. Okay, so that's what I'm suggesting. No art, but maybe we can sort. And presumably what we would wind up with is what many of you would recognize under the rubric of representational art. Well, that can't be a species of the genus if there ain't no genus. But pretend. What is a representative thing? What is it to represent? So my way of putting it, I suggest you go with me on this, is to represent is to be, we always say, somehow or other, of or about. Now that sounds like infelicitous English. You just have to get used to it. But thankfully we have, what do we call them? Variables, things with maximal ambiguity, because they're like pronouns, right? So of something, right? Of or about, and then you wiggled it, something. And all right, you get the idea? So to be a representative thingy is to be something possessed of such properties that fit it to be of or about. You might think that chair can't pull it off, and it isn't. I have no doubt that somebody thinks otherwise, maybe even one of my colleagues does, all right? But okay, some things are for sure, and the things that are for sure, what we might call representative thingies, things is a technical term for me, it would be, and now it goes all over the map again, right? There are all kinds of these. So the favored kind amongst my colleagues who are like top-notch philosophers of mind, mental states. Maybe this is what it is to be a mental state. It's to be a state that's of or about. It's got content, we might say, right? What are you thinking of? What are you dreaming of? I'm imagining, keep going, right? All right, so that's the deal. But, there are others, and then the others are vastly different. Like almost so different that, well, one wonders if we actually have a kind. I'm hopeful that there is a kind, a genuine kind, for which there can be a theory that specifies precisely such conditions that are necessary and sufficient for being, for all and only representative thingies. Good luck to my colleagues. I suspect they're on the right page here on that score. Okay, we need you wanted some color, did you? This guy's laughing, right? This guy's crying. Rubens, Peter Paul Rubens. The typical shape of a painting. That painting got wet on the way. I think he had to repaint it. Yeah, so here's the thought then, as I spend way too long mumbling to you and not talking about portraits, is that amidst our hopes for representational art, as we might have called it, there's the sort of the archetype, the paradigm case. If representation and representational thingies can be as varied as a diagram and a mental state, where, of course, neither a mental state nor a diagram is going to count as art in our, our intuitive sense of art that, we ought to learn to improve on in some way. Maybe there is no kind of which those are all instances, but the best kind would be something like a picture. Now, damn it, if anything has a chance of being something well-behaved, would be a picture. Pictures are of. Pictures are about. There's something, if you got yourself a picture, you got a picture of something. That's what pictures are. That's what pictures do. Maybe, I don't know, maybe better and worse, but all right, I better back up here. Be careful. Careful saying that's no good. Weeping, laughing, my colleagues, not really weeping, laughing. Right, okay, so, and then here's the thought. The keenest and cleanest and simplest, I like that. Least likely, least prone, maybe like impervious, maybe insulated by earning no counterexamples, right? Would be the portraits. The portraits. Now there, a portrait, I mean, some pictures, well, I might even wonder if it's a picture, but a portrait is maybe, the thought is maybe as good as you're going to get. And so the idea would be to sort and say, all right, basically it's a mess, but like we could work on that. Now, it turns out I just happened for contingent reasons to, as for all of us, I suppose, like portraiture, but all right. I'm going to run ahead and see what happens next, because I can't remember what's supposed to happen next. So here, oh shit, more weeping. This is laughing, weeping. Both. Sometimes my colleagues get together and weep and laugh. Right. Whoa, there's a famous image, weeping and laughing. 1557. All right. Among the many theories of art, that is the most airy and subject to a plethora of counterexamples is from somebody who is in a different tradition from me, but who is completely sane. I'm just going to read it. Either all works of visual art have some common quality, his word, or else when we speak of the works of art, we gibber. Everyone speaks of art making a mental classification by which he distinguishes the works of art from the others, the non-works. What is the justification for this classification? What is the quality common or peculiar to all members of this class? Oh, gosh, I doubt that. Whatever it be, no doubt, it's often found in the company of other qualities. But what it is to be art, right? It's essential. Gosh, I love that. You got to have it to be a work of art, and if you don't, you ain't. But now the suggestion is clean up, narrow, precify down to surely, right? There cannot be some quality without such a work. There must be some quality without which such a work of art cannot exist. So that's a long time ago. Okay, he's an old buzzard too, but I mean, his theory of art didn't survive any better than anyone else's. Pictures, maybe he had that in mind. All right, I want to look at some pictures with you. All right, so we can't do it the way John Walsh would insist on doing it in his Yale Lecture Series. Walsh, you guys know, So the Getty for a long time, right? Master art historian, he would say, all right, look at this picture. And then nobody got to do anything for at least a minute. You had to look like, it was just quiet. Like, I don't have the luxury of that kind of time. I would really like to just look at that. That's the idea. Now look at it, he would say. Look at it. All right. The only reason, well, I don't know, what's that about? The only reason that came into my possession is because I was damn sure that what everybody said it was about, it ain't about. Right, so Leutze, do you guys know Washington crossing the Delaware and the Met? That big, huge, enormous, that's Leutze, okay? So I think he was a great painter, German. So he paints this, the last painting before he died. He died in 1868. So here's this, what's that of? Well, you can here's one way you can say, it's of a lady and another lady and another lady and wide. You could do this, right? This isn't stupid to do. This is like, what's stupid about this? And you could give descriptive predicates, right? And there's this guy here, and he's got something on his head, right? But I seem to remember when the painting sold, it was supposed to be about one of the Waverley novels, which struck me as just completely, that's nuts. Ivanhoe's story or something like that. What? Right, all right. So you're done looking at the picture. I got to speed up. I'd love you to look at that picture. What's that of? Once again, nothing wrong with this. It's of, what? If you don't like it, you just, too bad. A beautiful woman, that's what I say, all right? In lovely fabric, a buff dude leaning over a naked baby. Like, we can do this, right? What? Don't pretend. And then you might think, well, yeah, but I'm missing something, right? There's something it's of or about, like beyond or past that, right? Okay, yeah, sure enough. So here's the thought. If you look at, so I'll give you the title now, Wisdom and Strength, that's what it's about. That doesn't mean it's not about, the other two, you were right. So one can wonder how's this work. And then you think, oh doggone it, pictures. Like I thought that was going to be the clean, tidy case. Like representation, good, paradigm case, pictures. Well, maybe you can't tell by look. All right. Like this is more complicated than we thought. We could get this case wrong. We don't know how to get this case. I think I got it figured out after 20 years. But the artist told us in this case. But all right. So here's the idea now. Well, there's an engraving. I don't know, 7 people, 6 men, 1 seated, so 5 men. What's that all about, you see? So here's something to notice then. These descriptive predicates, 7 people, 6 men, 5 men standing, 5 men in goofy hats, whatever, pointing in front of a window, drapery closed, under a clock, gesturing, dog and a cat. So those descriptive predicates could be assembled into a perfectly good, somebody tell me when, what time am I supposed to stop, President?
5:25.
5:25, what time is it now? So here's the day, here you go. It's okay, sorry. You got here by 7, I promise. The descriptive predicate, let me help myself to a scene. The descriptive predicate could be of this scene. That's language. So there's something that's not language, it's of the scene, and a descriptive predicate could be of the scene. So maybe here's something we learn. That pictures and language can represent or be of, but presumably I wanted to do this and I lost my nerve. I wanted to put up a picture that says Ching, right? And then President Chiang's picture. And then the next one, say covert, and President Mung's. Right, President Chiang's picture. You think that's wrong, right? Correct, that's wrong. So how does his name represent him, pick him? How is his name of him? The thought is, well, I know. Like you look at the picture is of him because, well, I don't know. For starters, it bloody looks like him, but his name doesn't look like him. So both language and pictures can be of, but evidently they do so in a vastly different way. How do pictures do it? Right. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm presuming there's an answer to that question, and my colleagues who work on these kinds of things could maybe help out, okay? So does it help you to just draw attention to the fact that we've got a gesture up there in the corner, Copernicus and Ptolemaios, okay? I don't know, does that help? Maybe it helps. Let's look at some more pictures. Oh, gee, I wish I had time. So there's a picture. I love this picture. Maybe you'd have to know your Bible to understand what this is of. Maybe you don't. Can you tell by looking what it's of? Yes, a little boy. Oh, hang on. Laurel leaves in his hair. A mentor. All right. Oh, gee, I already apologize for bad pictures. A famous one. Oh, what happened? Shit. Well, all right. Well, let's just, right, what's happening? Now what? We're almost at the end. Oh, all right. Let me just try something here. Be patient with me. Or try to be patient with me. Oh, all right, we've skipped some things here. So there's a portrait in the picture, but let's all agree that's not a portrait. Well, I don't know. Does anybody say this picture is a portrait? Not that, voting gets it. You don't get to vote on these things and determine the case. We're just it's sort of interesting. But that's not a portrait. Is this a portrait? So you had a portrait in the picture, but it's not. It doesn't get to be a portrait by portraying a portrait. That's the thought. Is this a portrait? See, 30 slides earlier, you didn't get the names. So we're just going to have to work with what we got. Is that a portrait? I don't know. You will look in vain for any name of anybody. You will get a descriptive predicate. The descriptive predicate you'll get, if you look really closely, is the author. Does that pick anybody out? You might think, that picks out the author. Okay, so who is that of? You say, the author. Who is the author? It's a weird question. Just a bit before 7, I bet I can get you to see that whenever we ask that question, we ask a very strange question. But here, with so much unknown, maybe even only having a predicate, like consider the predicate, amen. 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 As I intended it, amen. Humankind, instance of humanity, all right? It doesn't pick anybody out. Doesn't pick out Rosanna, doesn't pick out Matthew, doesn't pick out Cover. The thought is a portrait is a picture of somebody. Well, not somebody in general. There are no somebodies in general. There are no general people. Does everybody understand what I mean? There's no, that's not a portrait, even though, well, maybe it has a portrait. Can it be a portrait by containing a portrait? That's the thought. That one's a little bigger. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I got that. And it turns out that's not Milton. Let me just point something out, by the way. So that's a fact about this image, is that the image is of somebody, but it sure as hell isn't Milton. But never mind. But it says so right here. If you ever get interested in portraiture, especially 15th to 18th century portraiture, 97% of them will have a name. They're completely unreliable. Completely unreliable. Doesn't mean they're always wrong, but so often are they wrong. I'll illustrate that. How much time do I have left? Somebody just say. Brower, Professor Brower, how many minutes do I have? 13. Thank you, right? This is a famous miniature this big. And she, Carolyn Watson, renders this on the basis of this little image. Turns out it's not of him. She thought it was on the basis of who did it. Turns out she was wrong about who did it, as was everybody, right? But so that's impossible. Like, how could we see the front and the back at the same time? Okay, can a picture represent what one can't be aware of? Now, you got to be tricky with, be careful with the logic. It's not like it represents X as F and not F, but maybe it represents X as F, and also it represents X as not F. Like, it's not a conjunction of the one kind, which gives you a contradiction. Maybe it's a conjunction of the other kind. And later we turned it over, and maybe somehow it can accomplish that. Is that, well, I don't know, how do we count? Like, what does it depict? Well, there are two depict, or maybe three. Okay, so this is important. It's getting a little bigger. Here's my question for that. I guess I'll just cut to the chase here because we're going to run out of time really quickly, and I can tell everybody's bored sick. Is that, if I say, well, maybe it gets to be a portrait by contain, well, but no. Nah, still not. Yeah, like why? Because it has its name there? That won't do. That's the thought. The thought is, you can't turn a picture into a portrait by writing a name on it. Now, it's going to turn out, this is the scariest part for me as a scholar after 30 years of collecting and thinking about these things in my spare time. I'm basically brain dead, but when I'm not, and I think really hard about this stuff, the scariest of all is that it might turn out, genuinely turn out to be true, that you can turn a picture of a person into a portrait by writing a name on it. And man, oh man, do I hate that. You don't get to decide what a picture art, we want to get reality at its joints, unless you're one of the smart youngsters. So it's either yes or no. No. Well, it's getting bigger. But why? Hey, that doesn't portray or depict a person by containing one. Well, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. That's Diogenes, damn it. Not in a frame, right? Hercule de Fleury, a picture of him is that a picture of Hercule? It depicts something that is a picture of him. Does something get to be a portrait of something by containing a portrait of it? It's just a weird thought. But Diogenes, there's the man. And then nobody wants to say this is a portrait of Diogenes. Why is that? That contains, everybody says that's a portrait. Why isn't that a picture of a piece of paper that's a portrait? It can get worse. Now you get a piece of paper which has another piece of paper on top of it, which is, all right. Oh shit, look at this one. How do we count? It's a good question whether this is a portrait or not. You might think that's not a good question. Okay, sorry. Is it 6 portraits? Could one thing be 6 things? How many think one thing could be 6 things? You better bloody raise your hand. Right? I chuck you what am I going to chuck? A deck of cards, and I say count. And you say 1 and 4 and 52. Could it be 1 F but 6 G's? Could it be 1, I don't know, image? And then maybe 6 depictions of a person? See what I mean? So, but there's just 1 depiction of 6 people. This is 6 depictions of 6 people. And it contains or is of that. No, that and them. So are these significantly different? Nobody talks about this. I'm so old-fashioned, I think. That's interesting, and that's important. Otherwise, you don't know what you're talking about. That's just how it goes. We got to stop. Who's that? Here's what the youngsters say. You may be applicants to scholarships, but here's your first thought. Just admit it. You're really smart. I have no doubt you're smarter than I'll ever be. But here's the first thought. Well, it doesn't say. It's like, that sounds like an undergraduate for you. It's like, who's that? Well, it doesn't say. Would that help? Well, it would help me. I didn't ask, do you know who it is? I just wanted to know who it is. Presumably, there's someone of whom, oh, what's going on here? Anybody see it? I mean, you're supposed to learn to look. This does look impossible. Alive and dead? That's her head down there. The little fella's feeling sad for her. They said that it doesn't show enough to be two portraits. It's only one portrait. Is that what we're thinking? Like, you have to, like, it doesn't get to be a portrait unless, you get to see enough of her. Like, I should have, there's 147 images of, where's Anthony? Anthony? Yeah. Like, how many did you say? He looks at this gadget. He says, 148 images. He's like, holy, you're not going to make it. That's true. We're not going to make it. How many minutes I got?
7.
Huh? No, 7? Thanks. It doesn't say. An axe, her head. Does that show her in two places? Does it show her alive and dead? Like, you figure out how to count. Oh, no. How many is a different kind of, like cardinality questions. There's about, by my light, 17 different cardinality questions in portraiture. Like, nobody talks about this. Okay? There are 2 books on portraiture and 1 edited volume on portraiture. And then, like these sorts of things, you look in the book, you read the books, 2 plus 1. I think that'd be, Professor Mummert, that'd be 3. Not much, but nobody talks. We call this a group portrait. It's like famous Peter Paul Rubens, what? Selfie? What's a self-portrait? Is a self-portrait a portrait of a person who is the artist? Well, I don't know. You tell me. I saw 2 people over here saying yes. Some of you are timid. Why are you, decide. Say something. Don't be. Thanks. But then you say, but who is the artist? Would you be surprised to learn that there are 3 artists here? Is that a selfie if the existence of this object depends on the work, the artistic work of 3 people? I was reading something the other day. Oh, Waiting for Godot. Who's that? Who is that? Beckett says, why should we care who wrote something? Can't remember where he was. Right? Why should we care who the artist is? Well, you might want to care if you're trying to figure out whether it's a selfie or not. And you need to know who did it. But, his brother, Wovarius, and then the great Lipsius. With the dog, I wish we could talk about the dogs. There's a section in here. What? So is that a painting? Is a painting of a group? Oh, anybody? Seneca? It's called The 4 Philosophers. That's the title of this. And everybody thinks, here are the 4 philosophers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm thinking, are you crazy? Rubens did not regard himself as a philosopher. He's explicit about this. His brother hung out with Lipsius, who was a neo-Stoic, who gave us the first good edition of Seneca. Still the best, I guess. Various philosophical theologian. There's how you count 1, 2, 3. But still, however you count, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to get 4 somethings. But how could a portrait, is a group portrait a portrait? That's all right. Now we got one guy. Sorry, bad picture. Well, but one guy could be the King of Ireland and also the King of England and also the King of Scotland. Yeah? Oh, say, Professor Jacovides, is this a group portrait? Can you have a group portrait of one guy? Be careful how you say what a group portrait is. A group portrait is a portrait of several people. Well, that's not what we got here. It's a little bit like the case we were looking at earlier. I don't have time. I only got 1 minute, so I just want to, we're halfway through. Let me just, Suppose somebody says that this is an image, I don't know about portrait, but of Minerva. Yeah, Minerva. And then the undergraduates notice, thanks for the help. Turns out it's not Minerva, right? It's Catherine in Sweden. So what is this? Jones represented as, now you say, Jones represented as, a pumpkin. Right, Jones in a, is it near Halloween? Well, anyway, I dressed up as, right? So here we got Catherine represented as Minerva. So is this a portrait of Minerva or not? I mean, trust you me, this isn't a great example, although I love it because I'm a fan of this lady for lots of reasons. She wanted to be a man, for starters. She killed Descartes. They didn't kill Descartes, did she? Jacobides, she sure didn't. But he may have been poisoned. Probably not. This guy complained that it didn't look like him. So Durer's catching hell from Erasmus. It doesn't look. And then he says, well, but that was 5 years ago. I do look different now. So do we expect likenesses? That we expect them to be good and like, but do we expect them? We don't expect them all to be equally good. They won't stay that way because that stays the way it is and you don't. Remember that famous painting of the famous lady? Professor Smith, you're staring off into the woods there. Who said, I know it doesn't look like her, but it will? Picasso. All right? And he didn't mean she'll change and look like my portrait. She will never look like that portrait. Well, but what he meant was, you will start to look at it differently and you'll start to say, oh, my friend. Good old Leibniz. He complained? No, he didn't. Did he complain? Sophia had it done, and she complained it doesn't look like you. And he says, oh, never mind, but you've got to get the letters right. And he complained about the letters, and I think it took 3 or 4 pieces of correspondence. That's typical Leibniz for you, like get the letters right. All right, I wanted to talk about caricature because one of my colleagues, oh gosh, this is lovely stuff, Hogarth. I wanted to talk about, oh, jeez. Okay, I have 1 minute. I don't have any minutes left.
1 minute.
Okay, I'm done. I'm stopping. Like, what a place to, like, Aristotle being ridden by Phyllis. This is a famous episode. In history, when they do have the undergraduates please tell me, they'll get it wrong. Socrates and Xantippe, no. But maybe, all right, I'm gonna go, So that is Alexander and Diogenes. Is it? Is that a portrait of Alexander the Great and Diogenes? They say, looks like 2 dogs to me. Well, why isn't it Alexander as a dog? And Diogenes as a dog. So famous, you guys know that? The great Salvator Rosa. So Alexander goes to visit Diogenes. He's living in his barrel. What does Diogenes say? Like, get out of my sunlight. You're casting a shadow over, right? So he knew who the boss was, and it wasn't Alexander. Yeah, you can't read it. Alexander and Diogenes. You say, no. Oh, okay, so I have to stop. There's Thomas More, and there's Thomas More. How influential, a famous artist, the most famous artist in the Flemish at The Hague. And it had the influence. There's another one, same thing. There's another one a little bit later, same thing. There's another one a little bit later, same thing. There's another one a little bit later, same thing. They're getting worse and worse. I don't know if you noticed that. But these people are not this guy. Who's that? It doesn't say. Right, well, now we'll tell you. That's the great Thomas More. Well, hang on a minute. That's not who we were looking at earlier. Okay, so I'm going to stop. Dead people, portraits of dead people. You said I saw that earlier. No, you didn't. You saw that earlier. This is embarrassing. Galen. I mean, right there on the cover of the book. right? Dandelidia. That's not Galen, is it? Like you guys were looking at this one at the beginning of when it was just sitting here, right? Somebody just took it, redid it. This is after Rubens. Rubens didn't do a Galen. It says right there, P. Rubens delineated, fetch it. This is the kind of thing that can happen. Okay, I'll just go to the end. I'll read it. The connoisseurs. The head is undetermined. Some taking it for Julius Caesar, some for Holofernes, others for an antediluvian lawgiver, and so on. I think that's funny. All right. Well, it's worse than that. The visual, like in a painting, is, sorry, I'm done. It is general. By that I mean non-singular. Just as a man doesn't pick out Matthew. So shapes and colors can't be singular. They can't be of her, of him, of that. No assembly, that's it. That's it. I will let Aquinas and Occam make my point for me. Here's Aquinas. However many universals, generals, as it were, predicates, you pile up. You can never make them add up to anything singular, like works for a name. How does a name pick out President Chiang? And then how does a picture pick out that guy? It can't. No matter what common things are simultaneously conjoined, it is never incompatible with the whole aggregate of itself, that it should exist, sorry, typo, in something other than that in which it does exist. So this is the downer for me. Portraits are supposed to be de re singular, but they can't be, so there aren't any. Okay, I'm sorry to go over, and thanks for your patience.
While there are no portraits, there has been a lecture. So, we have a few minutes for questions, and I have one too, but please go ahead first. There are no portraits, and there are no questions. So, and the question is actually not related to
It doesn't. It doesn't.
but that's all right.
It is. It is certainly is all right.
So coming back to the philosophy of science anthology here, and the first collection is the Science and Pseudoscience, appropriately so, starting with Karl Popper's paper and then Kuhn's paper. So one thing, looking at the critique of Popper, I always feel like I'm on the side of Popper in the sense that he was saying falsifiability is a necessary condition for something to be called science. And as you claimed both in this lecture and in this book, that you ask the question, what is science? What is a portraiture that's not to be discovered inside science or inside art? So what is science? Well, Popper says, one necessary condition, not sufficient perhaps, is that the falsifiability. And then a lot of people came out and say, oh no, but I disagree. And then they often, not always, but often point to this, but some science has been proven wrong, and they end up still being scientifically useful and science. But then I say, wait a moment, that's not what Popper says.
That's right.
Because Popper did not say the lack of falsification.
Yeah, and he
said falsifiability.
And he also, right. This is.
I'm just want to make sure.
No, you're dead right. Wrong. No, and meanwhile, that kind of complaint which you cited, what that would show is that's not true science. Right? It's still science.
Right, or at least not yet at that moment.
No, but somebody retrospectively says it turns out it was, right, we falsified it. So it's not, right? No, you couldn't have falsified it if it wasn't falsifiable. So I'm on, right?
Falsifiability is not lack of falsification.
No, right, and it's not lack of falsehood or truth, either one. That's the point. It's a modal property. Yeah.
Now I feel much better.
No.
I'm confused by the attacks on Popper.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd be with you on that. But Jacovides here, who sometimes I think is from Mars, has a thought.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. About falsifiability?
Not about falsifiability.
Oh, shit. Okay, yeah, carry on.
So could you say the doctrine that portraits exist?
That what?
With the,
Say that, yeah.
say that with the doctrine that you hate, namely that when you add a name, you
Yeah.
make first signification. Do you think, I mean, as a warm-up question, do you think names allow for de re reference?
I think that's all that does, unless portraits do.
It's the only thing that has de re reference.
Yeah.
Even mental images don't have de re reference?
Maybe. Look, there's an elephant in the room, which 1, 2, 3, 4, which at least 5 people are thinking of, right? So we're not going to bring it up.
Okay.
That's part of the rules, you understand? Do not say, what about causation, right? That's why I didn't have President Chiang and then COVER, and right, because all I could use was a photograph. Now, I didn't have a painting of, but I had a painting. Like, is this a painting of? Well, there is no such person, I suppose. So, yeah. No, here's a thought. Can you avoid the where was it? Can you avoid this? Well, here's how, like, just to remind you of elementary logic, here's how you avoid the conclusion, right? You say that one of the premises is false, or what? It's invalid. Is this invalid? Yeah. Or an enthymemic, like something's missing, you logicians, or smart people. Well, if you're not going to, I'm not going to tell you. All right, so pretend this follows, like I say. Your thought, I take it, was that this is false?
I guess.
Yeah, so you reply to Aquinas and Occam and say, look, no matter how, so this is why disjunctive and conjunctive Boolean forms don't work only in the propositional logic, not in the first order predicate calculus. So happily, Frege makes this point a long time ago, the mathematician Frege, that when you use predicates, I don't know, let's get to see some images, nothing else. Maybe I can find it here. That guy did, that's funny, I tell you. Maybe this will help Professor Jacovides if I can find it. He said when you have a general proposition with no names in it, the proposition isn't about anything, right? I want to talk about this picture. All right, well, I won't be able to find it then. But, oh, man. But that seemed false to you? Here, how about this one? It is true that at first sight, the proposition, all whales are mammals, seems to be not about concepts. Leave concepts out. Frege had this view. It seems to be about animals. But if we ask, which animal? Then we're speaking of them and we're not able to point out anyone in particular. Even supposing a whale's before us, our proposition does not state anything about it. I think this is right. And you might say, well, okay, we cannot infer from it that the animal before us is a mammal without additional premise that it's a whale, as to which our proposition says nothing. As a general principle, it is impossible to speak of an object. And by that, he doesn't mean an object in general. There are no objects in general. It's like to be an object is to be a particular object. Where was it? Without in some way designating or naming it. Now, he's given himself some room here that I think Professor Acey is thinking, why can't definite descriptions work? Definite descriptions don't work. They've got a uniqueness clause in them. That's why we need identity, numerical identity, to do those. But all that says is how many. It doesn't say which one. You can't refer with a definite description. You can't pick out. You can't name. You can't get they. So even if you say the, okay, Let me do one more. It is surely clear that when anyone uses the sentence, all men are mortal, he does not want to say something about some chief Akpanya of whom perhaps he has never heard. So when you say that, you are not talking about him. And what I want to say is, there is no him or her or anything about which you have made a claim when you say that. It's not. It's a general proposition. It's not singular. Now, if we got names, okay, that's their job. Here's what they do. They latch on to a thing. They point. They rigidly de re refer, as we would put it. There are general facts that you cannot ever. Oh, this was my point about Boolean normal form. To say it's not to say all men are mortals. I say either Matthew is mortal, or President Chiang is mortal, or right, Eric is mortal, or right. So it's not to say that.
I have one question.
Yeah.
If you used the formula. where
But
you
yeah,
said-
but yes, I agree. If I were wrong that generalities could be piled up and you'd finally picked out a particular, mind you, every single one of the generals could be instantiated by more than one thing. And so let's hope we get a lot of it. And even hoping you just get one, it doesn't, right? Tomorrow it might be a different one, or you might have the wrong, yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff.
No worries.
Yeah, right.
So by the equation where we end up with, there is no portraiture. Can we also end up with there is no humans?
I'm sorry. Like goodness sakes.
By that same
No,
by that same token?
no, that would be a non sequitur of numbing grossness.
Okay.
Or you can see, right?
Well,
Look, suppose there's a person,
through-
and then I don't know. The worry is there can't be anything which is, let's take you, of Rosanna, which is pictorial, which is shapes and colors, and right? Could some assembly of shapes and colors be of you? To be of you is to be necessarily such that it's not of him. It's not of anything numerically distinct from you. So if it's of, necessarily it has to be of you. Nobody would say this, I painted a beautiful portrait. Yeah? Say, portrait? I know, but somebody, looky! It's exactly like her! It's of her. I painted a portrait of her. We wouldn't say that, right? Elephant in the room has to wait. So does that answer you? We still got you, but we don't have a portrait of you. We got a picture.
But, yeah, I was thinking in an age where we're hitting more into like what is human, and where we have more representation of human through AI and
I see,
whatever. Are we
yeah.
getting to a point where we could say there are no humans? Or will there
I-
always be
I-
a
I-
distinction through this kind of logic?
Yeah, I think I have nothing to say about that. I sort of don't understand it. I feel morally sure that nothing I said or tried to say has any entailments one way or another. But trust me, if you think you see a connection, off you go and try to, articulate it. That would be lovely. Give it a go. Dummies like me, there's a lot of things I can't see. So over to you.
I've got a couple more questions, but I know that also it's 5:40.
Oh,
so,
shit.
Let's continue the conversation here in the lecture by approaching Professor Cooper individually and with whatever representation of correspondence that might entail. But in the meantime, thank you very much.
Thank you.